Instructors at an esteemed music academy habitually overlooked Lillian Porter, the unassuming new aide. When an emergency disrupts a critical performance event, they push her to tackle an extraordinarily complex piano composition. Unbeknownst to them, the modest woman they've been disregarding is, in fact, one of the globe's most renowned pianists. The revered corridors of the Robertson Conservatory buzzed with a familiar orchestra of noises. Students rehearsing arpeggios, instructors delivering sharp feedback, and the occasional exasperated groan. Amid this clamor, Lillian Porter glided unnoticed, tidying scores and polishing piano keys with quiet precision. At 38, Lillian intentionally faded into the scenery. Her brown hair was neatly tied in a plain braid, her blue dress understated, her actions deliberate and efficient. 6 weeks into her role as an administrative aide, most faculty scarcely noticed her, which suited her perfectly. Ms. Porter, these scores should be sorted by composer, not by date. Dr. Constance. Whitmore's voice sliced through the room, authoritative and exacting. The head of piano studies didn't bother looking up from her elegant planner. Of course, Dr. Whitmore. I'll correct it immediately. Lillian responded quietly, accepting the pile of music from the professor's perfectly manicured hands. Dr. Whitmore gave a brief nod before striding down the hallway, her heels tapping rhythmically on the marble floor. Lillian observed her departure, a subtle smile flickering on her lips. As she rearranged the scores, her gaze lingered on a particularly intricate licit transcription. Her fingers stirred slightly, an instinctive response to the familiar notes. 5 years had passed since her last performance. Caught daydreaming, Miss Porter. Professor. Walter Thornton's voice jolted her from her thoughts. The aging composition instructor peered at her through his wire-framed glasses, his bow tie perpetually askew. Just sorting, Professor, Lillian replied, quickly organizing the sheets correctly. Well, when you're finished, Madame Dubois requires assistance for tomorrow's scholarship recital. Something about the program notes. I'll head there at once, Lillian assured him. Professor Thornton lingered, observing her swift work. You know, he remarked, for someone with no formal music training, you handle those scores like you grasp their intricacy. Lillian kept her gaze lowered. I've learned a bit in my 6 weeks here. Remarkable, he said, his tone more doubtful than impressed. But remember, impressed, Porter, truly understanding music demands more than knowing notes on a page. It requires years of rigor, talent, and proper upbringing. Lillian nodded humbly. I wouldn't assume otherwise, Professor. Seemingly satisfied, Thornton shuffled off, grumbling about falling standards and the days when staff knew their roles. That afternoon, Lillian tapped lightly on the door of Madame Elizabeth Dubois, the conservatory's distinguished French performance coach. Entres! Came the regal command. Madame Dubois sat at her desk, glasses balanced on her nose, surrounded by piles of documents. At 65, she exuded hate authority, her silver hair neatly coiled, her posture impeccably poised. Miss Porter, at last, these program notes are a mess. I need them retyped for tomorrow's scholarship and event. The donors demand flawlessness. Of course, Madame, Lillian replied, taking the stack, noting the red, inked corrections scrawled across the pages. And ensure there are no errors this time. I won't tolerate another fiasco like last week's recital programs. Lillian swallowed a retort. The fiasco was a single misplaced accent in a French composer's name, an error Madame Dubois herself had made, though Lillian would never mention it. I'll be thorough, she promised. As she turned to leave, her eyes caught an open score on Madame's piano. Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the same piece she'd seen earlier. Is this what Gregory Palmer will perform tomorrow? she asked impulsively. Madame Du Bois raised a manicured eyebrow. Yes. Why do you ask? Lillian paused, then proceeded cautiously. It's a demanding piece for a student. Mr. Palmer is our most talented student. A challenge is exactly what he needs. Madame Du Bois replied, her eyes narrowing. Though, I doubt you're qualified to judge the complexity of a licit transcription, Miss Porter. You're correct. I shouldn't have spoken, Lillian said, retreating. The morning of the scholarship competition crackled with nervous anticipation. Throughout the conservatory, donors in tailored suits and elegant jewelry mingled with faculty in the grand lobby, while students secluded themselves in practice rooms for last-minute preparations. Lillian arrived early, wearing her finest navy dress, her braid more meticulously styled than usual. Today's performances would decide which young musicians earned the prestigious Robertson Scholarship, a full ride award that could propel careers. Ms. Porter, thank goodness you're here. Professor Thornton called, beckoning her toward a group of board members. The programs, please. She handed him the freshly printed stack, still warm from the press. Well done, he said, barely glancing at them before passing them to the donors. Now, we need you backstage. The students are in their usual state of frenzy. Backstage was a whirlwind of nerves. Performers paced, mimed finger movements, or sat silently, mentally rehearsing. Gregory Palmer, the conservatory's star student, stood apart, his face ashen, hands trembling faintly. Mr. Palmer, are you okay? Lillian approached cautiously. He glanced up, barely registering her. I'm fine. He muttered, unconvincingly. You're playing the Liszt piece, right? I overheard your practice yesterday. It was stunning. Gregory blinked, finally focusing on her. You were listening. Lillian offered a soft smile. It's hard to miss such passionate playing. But the technical sections, he began, then shook his head. I'm not sure I can manage them today. Not with everyone watching. A familiar ache stirred in Lillian's chest, memories of her own stage fright resurfacing. May I see? She asked, pointing to his score. He handed it over, perplexed. Most staff couldn't read music beyond the basics. Lillian turned to the tricky passage she'd heard him struggle with. You're attacking this part too forcefully, she said, quiet with. Liszt demands strength, but it's about precision, not power. Picture it like waves, not a storm. Gregory stared. How do you know that? Realizing her slip, Lillian quickly returned the score. Something I overheard Madame Du Bois tell another student. Before he could press further, Dr. Whitmore swept in, clipboard in hand. Places, everyone! Mr. Palmer, you're opening. She turned to Lillian dismissively. Ms. Porter, keep the green room quiet. As Lillian withdrew, she heard Gregory murmur, waves, not a storm. Waves. From the green room, Lillian listened as the scholarship competition began. Dr. Whitmore's voice reverberated through the speakers, welcoming esteemed guests and highlighting the event's significance. The recital hall's pristine acoustics carried every note to Lillian's ears. Gregory performed first, his rendition steady, but lacking spark. He followed her advice on the difficult passage, navigating it more smoothly than at rehearsal. The applause was polite but restrained. One by one, other students took the stage. Some shone, others faltered under pressure. Lillian's trained ear picked up subtleties most would overlook. During a break, Madame Du Bois entered the green room, looking frazzled. Ms. Porter, take these refreshments to the judges' table, she directed, pointing to a tray of water glasses, and stay discreet. As Lillian approached the judges, she overheard Dr. Whitmore speaking quietly to Professor Thornton. Palmer completely misread the list. Too restrained in the allegro, too cautious in the crescendos. I've told Elizabeth her methods are outdated. Thornton replied, sipping his coffee. Today's students need strict guidance, not French musings about emotion. Lillian set the glasses down silently, but Thornton noticed her. "Ah, our resident listener," he said loudly, drawing Dr. Whitmore's sharp glance. "Tell us, Ms. Porter, what did you think of Palmer's performance?" His tone was meant to humiliate, but something, perhaps the music still echoing in her mind, or memories of her own mentors, prompted Lillian to answer honestly. His technique was strong, but he hasn't captured the piece's essence. Liszt's transcriptions aren't just technical feats. They're reinterpretations that should reflect both composers' spirits. Silence followed, heavy and stunned. Dr. Whitmore's teacup paused midair. "Excuse me," Thornton spluttered. Lillian flushed, lowering her eyes. "I'm sorry. I spoke out of turn." "Indeed you did," Dr. Whitmore snapped. "Return to your tasks, Ms. Porter, and leave critiques to those qualified." As Lillian hurried back, she missed the curious glance exchanged between the professors, a spark of doubt forming. The final segment of the scholarship competition was about to start after a brief pause. The recital hall was packed with affluent donors, faculty, performers, families, and students, all bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The polished wooden walls seemed to pulse with expectation. Backstage, however, a crisis was brewing. "What do you mean he can't play?" Dr. Whitmore's hushed voice was razor sharp. "The Danson Foundation representatives are here specifically for the list." Gregory Palmer sat slumped on a bench, head bowed, breathing unevenly, his right hand shaking uncontrollably. "I can't feel my fingers," he gasped. "They're numb." Madame Dubois knelt beside him, her face etched with worry. "A panic attack, I suspect. Even the most gifted experience them." "This is unacceptable," Dr. Whitmore hissed. "The Danson donation depends on today's performances." They insisted on a Liszt piece. Professor Thornton paced, his bow tie now hopelessly crooked. "Can another student step in without rehearsal?" "Impossible. The Liszt transcription is incredibly demanding. No other student has prepared it." Lillian stood quietly in the corner, watching. The Liszt score on the piano seemed to beckon her. 5 years since she'd played publicly. 5 years of recovery and uncertainty. What about Michelson or Jang? Thornton suggested frantically. Michelson already performed, and Jang plays violin. Whitmore shot back. "We're out of options. We'll have to cancel the final performance." Madame Dubois said somberly. "We'll explain it's a medical emergency." Dr. Whitmore paled. "The Danson Foundation will pull their funding. That's $2,000 million in scholarships lost." As the professors debated in tense whispers, Lillian stepped toward Gregory. Kneeling beside him, opposite Madame Dubois, she spoke softly. Gregory breathed deeply. "Hold for 4, release for 8. He tried to follow, his breathing steadying slightly. "The numbness is normal," she reassured him. "It'll fade, but you need time." "There is no time," Dr. Whitmore snapped. "We're on in 5 minutes." Lillian stood, her voice firm. "I could play instead." 3 stunned faces turned to her. Thornton laughed harshly. "Don't be ridiculous, Miss Porter. This is no time for jest." "I'm serious," Lillian said, holding his gaze. "You're a secretary," Dr. Whitmore said slowly, as if to a child. "This is one of the most technically daunting pieces in piano literature." "I understand its challenges," Lillian replied. Madame Dubois studied her, a flicker of realization in her eyes. "You claimed you had no musical training." "I never said that," Lillian corrected softly. "You assumed it." The professors exchanged looks, desperation clashing with disbelief. "This is outrageous," Dr. Whitmore said. "We can't send an untrained staff member to perform for the Danson Foundation." The audience's restlessness echoed from the hall. The intermission had dragged on. "What choice do we have?" Madame Dubois asked, her French accent thickening with the stress. "It's Miss Porter or no performance." Thornton shook his head vehemently. "This will be a catastrophe." Dr. Whitmore closed her eyes, weighing options. "Fine," she said curtly. "Ms. Porter will play. The piece is of 14 minutes. It buys us time to craft an excuse for the donors." She faced Lillian, her tone icy. "Do you even know the piece?" "Yes," Lillian answered simply. "This is highly irregular." Thornton protested. "Wha? Know nothing about her skills." "We know nothing about her at all," Madame Dubois murmured, her curiosity deepening. Whitmore leaned close to Lillian, her voice a low threat. "If you disgrace this institution, you're fired." "Understood." Lillian nodded, her pulse quickening. Not from fear, but from a rekindled thrill. As they guided her toward the stage, Thornton shoved the sheet music into her hands. "At least pretend to follow this. Act like you know what you're doing." Lillian took the pages with a faint smile. "I won't need these, but thank you." Before they could react to her bold claim, the stage manager signaled urgently. 30 seconds. Whitmore took a deep breath, donned a polished smile, and stepped onto the stage to address the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen circumstances, Gregory Palmer cannot perform. However, we are privileged to present another pianist performing Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony." As she spoke, Lillian closed her eyes, flexing her fingers. After 5 years of recovery and doubt, Lillian Porter, once celebrated as Lillian Curtis, was about to perform again. The audience's polite applause as Lillian stepped onto the stage was lukewarm at best. In the front row, Dr. Whitmore sat stiffly beside Professor Thornton, both wearing forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Madame Dubois, however, leaned forward, her expression keen and intrigued. The gleaming grand piano sparkled under the stage lights, its lid fully raised. Lillian approached it with quiet reverence, adjusting the bench with effortless precision. This small, familiar motion, executed with such finesse, drew a slight shift in the audience's focus. Seated at the piano, Lillian paused to ground herself. 5 years of therapy, rebuilding strength in her injured hands, had brought her here. She hadn't planned this moment, hadn't known today would mark her return to the stage. Yet here she was. Her hands touched the keys. From the opening, commanding chords of Beethoven's iconic symphony, reimagined through Liszt's virtuosic transcription, it was evident something remarkable was unfolding. Lillian's fingers danced with uncanny accuracy, coaxing sounds from the piano that seemed almost superhuman. The famous four-note motif filled the hall with orchestral power, yet with the intimacy only a solo piano could deliver. The audience transformed. Polite interest gave way to stunned disbelief, then rapt awe. Dr. Whitmore's forced smile vanished, replaced by wide-eyed astonishment. Professor Thornton leaned forward, his glasses slipping unnoticed. As Lillian entered the development section, her playing revealed not just technical brilliance but deep emotional insight. This wasn't merely a faithful reproduction of notes. It was music brought vividly to life, reinterpreted by someone who grasped Beethoven's bold vision and Liszt's pianistic genius. Madame Dubois reacted first, a soft mon Dio, escaping as recognition dawned. She gripped Thornton's arm, whispering urgently, "Ceased, Lillian Curtis." The name spread through the audience in hushed murmurs. Lillian Curtis, the prodigy who dazzled Europe 15 years ago. Lillian Curtis, whose career was halted by a tragic accident. Lillian Curtis, who vanished after a failed comeback in Vienna 5 years prior. On stage, Lillian was immersed, reconnected with a part of herself she'd suppressed. Her once injured hands moved with assured strength, producing cascades of sound that filled the hall. The most demanding passages, which had challenged Gregory, flowed from her as naturally as breath. Where the young student played with solid technique but hesitant emotion, Lillian's performance carried the depth of someone who had known both triumph and profound loss. Dr. Whitmore's face was drained of color. Thornton repeatedly adjusted his glasses, as if to verify what he was witnessing. Only Madame Dubois had moved past initial shock, her eyes shining with emotion. As Lillian neared the final movements, she allowed herself to meet the audience's gaze. Their expressions weren't just impressed, they were transformed. Donner's faculty and students were united in witnessing true artistry. With strength, grace, and perfect balance, Lillian concluded the piece, the final chords resounding with authority. Silence followed for 3 heartbeats, the room suspended in the wake of her performance. Then, the audience erupted. The standing ovation was instantaneous and deafening. Those who had sat politely moments before were now on their feet, clapping with fervor. Some wiped tears, others shouted, "Brava!" A distinguished elderly patron in the back wept openly. Lillian lingered at the piano, hands resting in her lap, eyes closed, absorbing the sound, not of music now, but of heartfelt appreciation. When she stood and offered a modest bow, the applause intensified. Dr. Whitmore remained seated, pale and rigid. Thornton, composure abandoned, shook his head in disbelief, mouth agape. Madame Dubois joined the ovation, her eyes glistening. As Lillian took another bow, she noticed Gregory in the wings, his panic forgotten, his face alight with awe. She gave him a gentle smile before turning back to the audience. Dr. Whitmore finally stirred, rising mechanically and approaching the stage. Taking the microphone, she addressed the still, clapping crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," she said, her voice unsteady. "It seems we owe you an explanation." She turned to Lillian, struggling to maintain composure. "Would you like to introduce yourself properly, Miss Porter? Or rather, Miss Curtis?" A hush fell as Lillian stepped forward. For years, she'd concealed her identity, buried her past. Now, under the warm stage lights, she felt unburdened. "Yes," she said simply, "I am Lillian Curtis." The revelation sparked fresh excitement in the crowd. An older man in a fine suit leaned toward his companion, whispering loudly, "Curtis, the finest Liszt interpreter of her era." Dr. Whitmore's smile was strained. "Perhaps you could clarify for our audience why a world-famous pianist has been working as our administrative aide for 6 weeks. Though, meant to embarrass, the question met Lillian's newfound confidence. 5 years ago, an injury led doctors to believe I'd never play again, she explained calmly. After surgeries and years of therapy, I wasn't sure if I could, or should, return to the stage. I needed to rediscover my connection to music, away from the concert world's pressures. She glanced at the faculty, who looked uneasy. The Robertson Conservatory's reputation for excellence drew me here. I wanted to immerse myself in music, to observe and learn before deciding my future. Madame Dubois joined them on stage, her poise restored. "Why keep your identity hidden?" she asked, though her tone hinted at understanding. "Would you have treated me the same if you'd known?" Lillian replied gently. The question lingered, pointed but unanswerable. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably, while Thornton busied himself with his bow tie. A silver-haired man stood from the audience. "Miss Curtis, I'm Robert Danson. My foundation came to support new talent, but we've witnessed a triumphant comeback. Would you teach a master class for our scholarship recipients?" Before Lillian could answer, Dr. Whitmore interjected eagerly. "The Robertson Conservatory would be thrilled to host Ms. Curtis for a series of master classes," she declared, her tone suddenly warm. "In fact, we've been discussing an artist in residence role. Lillian raised an eyebrow at the fabrication, but stayed silent. Mr. Danson smiled. Wonderful. Then we can increase our funding commitment. Talent must be nurtured, don't you agree, Dr. Whitmore? As they discussed details, Thornton approached Lillian, fidgeting with his glasses. Ms. Curtis, he began, his earlier arrogance replaced by awkward respect. I apologize for not recognizing your remarkable talent. You never looked for it. Lillian replied evenly. We'll often see only what we expect. He nodded, uneasy, then added, I hope you'll consider staying in a more fitting role. As the faculty crowded around, eager to align themselves with the celebrated Lillian Curtis, Gregory Palmer approached from the wings. I've never heard anything like it, he said, awe in his voice. You will? Lillian assured him, with time and the right guidance. Will you teach me? He asked, hope in his eyes. I'd be honored, she replied. But only if you play for yourself, not for them. She nodded toward the faculty and donors, now deep in conversation. In that moment, seeing Gregory's earnest expression, Lillian knew her next chapter, not a return to the solitary life of a touring virtuoso, but teaching, mentoring, and sharing her hard-earned wisdom. 1 month later, Lillian Curtis sat in her new office at the Robertson Conservatory, her door bearing a nameplate, Artist in Residence, a role crafted for her after her stunning return. Dr. Whitmore and Professor Thornton had become almost overly deferential, constantly seeking her input. Only Madame Dubois treated her with genuine warmth, free of apology or reverence. As Lillian reviewed masterclass applications, a knock sounded. Gregory Palmer entered, holding sheet music for his upcoming recital. Professor Curtis, he greeted with a smile. I've been working on that passage as you advised. Let's hear it, she said, pointing to the piano. As Gregory played, Lillian reflected on how swiftly her life had changed. Sometimes the greatest truths emerge not from concealing who we are, but from daring to reveal it. If this story moved you, remember that appearances can deceive, and true gifts often hide in plain view. Have you ever been underestimated or discovered unexpected depths in someone? Share your stories in the comments. Did you enjoy this tale of hidden talent revealed? Subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories that remind us to look beyond the surface and treat everyone with respect. Until next time, know that the most remarkable people often seem the most ordinary at first glance.